Welcome everybody to our annual Stroke Group Network Conference. My name is Beth and I am the Group Networks Manager at the Stroke Association. It is always an honour to be chairing this fabulous event. So thank you so much for joining us this morning as we come together as one community. I have to say, this is one of the highlights of my year. Now, we have 150 group representatives joining us today from across 122 groups from all four corners of the UK. And we also have 47 Stroke Association staff joining and some group members joining us for the first time too. Of everyone joining today, 59% are new to this online event, so a huge welcome. And for those 41% who have joined us previously, it is great to have you back. We also have 8 groups meeting in the Midlands face to face to watch this first day of the event together. So we really look forward to hearing how that goes. As I always say, this is your conference. The space is yours. So please take this opportunity to learn from each other, to connect, to support each other, and to celebrate the absolutely incredible work and support you give to so many people affected by stroke across the UK. Over the next 2 days, sit back and enjoy 5 information giving sessions. The programme is always designed with group volunteers in mind, and I want to say a huge thank you to this year's event planning group, always made up of group representatives and staff, and they really challenge us to get this programme right. So we have 2 sessions today. The first one will be with Juliet Bouverie, our Chief Executive, sharing an update from the Stroke Association. And then she'll be joined by Stephen King, our Chair of Trustees, and David Jones, volunteer at Grampian Stroke Club, for a bit of a discussion. So let's get going. I'd like to welcome Juliet Bouverie, our Chief Executive, to take us into the first session. So over to you, Juliet.
Thank you very much, Beth, and good morning, everybody. It's really, really nice to have the opportunity to talk to you all again. I do hope you're all well, and that you're really looking forward to the next couple of days. So, as Beth said, we're welcoming both group leaders, volunteers and members from Stroke Association support groups, but also members from independently run groups. And we've got group representatives from all across the UK, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm delighted that 59% of you are new to this conference. So I really hope that you enjoy the opportunity to connect with each other, to learn and to share, and that you go away inspired with lots of great ideas for how to make your group as effective as possible in the future. So I'm going to talk to you for about half an hour, and then we're going to have a chat with Stephen King, Chair of Trustees, and David Jones, who many of you may know is from the Grampian Stroke Club. So next slide, please. So the first thing I wanted to do was to acknowledge the really sad death of Her Majesty the Queen. Many of you will know that she was actually our patron, and she did a wonderful job raising the profile of all the charities that she was involved in. And obviously the Stroke Association was particularly special to her heart because, as many of you will know, Princess Margaret, her sister, had a number of strokes and very sadly died of a stroke. Next slide, please. And these are some lovely pictures of the Queen visiting the Nottingham Stroke Unit in 1999 with our former Chief Executive, Margaret Goose. I'm sure you'll all notice that the Queen is very appropriately dressed in purple. And this was before my time. I've been with the Stroke Association 6 years. So 1999 was before I started. But I gather from those who were there on the day, it was an amazing day. And the Queen did so much to raise the profile of stroke and also the importance of hyperacute stroke units. And I have to say that I had the huge privilege of attending on behalf of the charity the Queen's funeral on Monday, the 19th of September in London. I have to say it was an occasion that I will never, ever forget. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes our vision, our purpose, and our strategic goals. For those of you who've been at a stroke group network conference before, you may well have seen this slide. So our vision is for there to be fewer strokes and for people affected by stroke to get the help that they need to live the very best life that they can. And we want to drive better outcomes in stroke prevention, treatment, and lifelong support for everyone affected by stroke. And our goals, which reflect the priorities for us for the next 10 years, are that we want to make stroke the priority it needs to be. We want to ensure that everyone affected by stroke has access to the rehabilitation and lifelong support that they need. And we want to partner with people and communities to help them take action on stroke. And that final one is so important to us because we know that we cannot tackle the challenge of stroke on our own. We can only do it with people like you who are based in local communities who can provide that fun and friendship through stroke groups that we know stroke survivors so appreciate. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've achieved for people affected by stroke over the last 12 months, and then I'm going to go on to talk about our future plans. So I'm pleased to say that last year we supported more stroke survivors than ever before. So our 300 stroke support coordinators increased their reach by nearly 6%. And we know that actually our stroke support coordinators were having to deal with increasing complexity in people's needs. Here for You and Stroke Connect, which are our two telephone support services that we started at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, are going from strength to strength. They are now core services that we are committed to maintaining. And since the beginning that Stroke Connect started in April 2020, we've reached over 12,000 stroke survivors, and we have over 132 hospitals who regularly refer stroke survivors to that service. Our stroke groups continue to be amazing. You continue to be amazing. Many of you have got back to face-to-face meetings or are providing a mix of online and face-to-face meetings. And last year, Stroke Association support groups provided much needed and really appreciated support to over 3,300 stroke survivors. And our helpline reached 19,000 people, and My Stroke Guide had a record 42,000 new visitors to the site last year. The second thing that I really wanted to celebrate with all of you was the extraordinary media coverage and television awareness that has been created through the stroke storyline in Emmerdale. I suspect that some of you on the call may be Emmerdale fans. I'm fast becoming one. And for those of you who watch Emmerdale, you will know that the actor, Mark Charnock, who plays the character Marlon Dingle, had a stroke back in March 2022. And the Stroke Association has been working really closely with the Emmerdale team to advise on the storyline and to make sure that the script is as realistic and authentic as possible. And we're now following Marlon through his stroke journey, through his thrombectomy in hospital, his discharge from hospital in a wheelchair, and now his struggle to recover at home. And we're absolutely delighted by the amount of awareness and media coverage that this story has generated for us. We're also really pleased that we influenced a number of landmark policy documents across the UK last year. So in England, NHS England produced the National Stroke Service model, which sets out what good practice for stroke survivors looks like, from prevention right through to treatment, rehabilitation, and life after stroke. We influenced an equivalent document in Scotland called the Progressive Stroke Pathway. We worked very closely with our clinical and policy and government colleagues in Wales to influence the quality statement for stroke in Wales. And despite the upheaval and continuing political uncertainty in Northern Ireland, we put pressure on the government, and they have now finally published an action plan for stroke for Northern Ireland. So we're really pleased that now stroke is a policy priority in all 4 countries of the UK. And now our job is to translate those policy commitments into tangible service improvements for real people. We're working really closely in England with the 20 stroke networks, the integrated stroke delivery networks. And session 2, after lunch with Jen Gardner, is going to talk all about the role of stroke networks and what we're doing to make sure that peer support and referring to stroke groups is an integral part of what stroke networks do. We've also been working with the stroke networks to make sure that your voice, the stroke survivor voice, is at the heart of local decision making. So this time last year, for those of you who were at last year's conference, you may remember me talking about the fact that we redesigned our operating model to create new ways of working so that we could reach more stroke survivors and add even more value and have even more influence and impact on their lives. Well, I'm pleased to say that those new ways of working are really starting to bear fruits in terms of how we are supporting you as groups. Each of our 10 localities now has a dedicated engagement team. You should all know who your engagement officer is, and that person is responsible for supporting you with what you need. And we've done a number of things to bring the stroke group network to life. We've updated our handbook for stroke association groups. We've got a best practice toolkit for independently run groups. We've updated resources for groups, like how best to fundraise, what you can do in terms of activities, how you should manage your governance. We've got new partnerships, such as that with Just Bowls. We've run 2 UK online sessions, one around salt awareness, the second around physical activity. We've got regular communications to all groups now from the Central Group Networks team, and we're setting up local forums so that you can start to meet other local volunteers to connect and share ideas. And I gather that in the Midlands today, there's a little Midlands watch party where 18 people from the Midlands are all watching this conference together. So hi to the Midlands team. And the other thing that we're trying to do is to make sure that our decisions are shaped by the expertise and voice of people affected by stroke. So we've been doing a lot in the last year to ramp up patient involvement. We're setting up locality involvement groups so that stroke survivors can work with us to shape our plans and our decisions. And we're also doing that nationally too, through the National Stroke Strategic Voices group. And over the last year, we've had over 400 people affected by stroke who've been sharing their expertise and ideas and shaping what we do. So many, many thanks. Next slide, please. I'm also pleased to report that we're in a really good financial position. Prior to COVID, we were running nearly a £3 million deficit. So our expenditure was outstripping our income by nearly £3 million. Over the last 2 years, we've implemented a number of measures, both to increase income and to reduce expenditure. So you will see that for the last financial year, we've increased our income by 6.6 million. 2.2 million of that is due to a different technical way of accounting for legacies, but it still represents considerable growth. And you will see that we have reduced our expenditure by 2.5 million. But I want to reassure you that reduction in expenditure has not been at the expense of all the wonderful services and support that we provide for stroke survivors. We have maintained our expenditure on stroke support and slightly increased our expenditure on research. So the great news is that we are able to report a really healthy surplus. It's a £9.6 million surplus, and I'm going to go on shortly to tell you what our plans are for spending down that surplus money. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was all the good news, but I'll be honest with you, we are operating in a very tough external environment. Every day in the media, we hear stories about the NHS and the care system being in crisis. I heard somebody say the other day that the NHS is not only on its knees, it's actually flat on its face. And we know that there are challenges with gaps in staffing. We're seeing longer ambulance response times across the UK. We're seeing that access to thrombolysis has not yet recovered since COVID. Thrombectomy is not available to everyone who could benefit from it. Community services are struggling, and it's really difficult to get access to a GP. And I think this just highlights how important it is for all of us to play our part in making stroke the priority it needs to be, in offering tangible solutions to help our colleagues in health and social care, and the importance that volunteers and activities like stroke groups can provide to take away some of the pressure on the system. We also are all painfully aware of the rising cost of living. I have heard people say that the cost of living crisis is actually now turning into a poverty crisis. As a result of this cost of living increase, we've been reviewing what we can offer. So I would say for any of you in your groups that have members or volunteers that are worried about cost of living, please do call our stroke helpline, or please do go onto our website. We have lots of really helpful resources that can help you through this difficult financial period. And we're also extending our partnerships with organisations like the Department of Work and Pensions and the Money and Pensions Advice Service, which has a network of money advisors who can help people with debt advice. And please do let us know if the cost of living is impacting on your ability to run your groups effectively. We do want to pick up on any emerging issues. We're setting up a cost of living oversight group, so we would really appreciate any feedback so that that can further inform and influence what we do to support people through these extraordinary economic times. We also know that health inequalities needs to be a bigger priority for all of us. We know at the Stroke Association that our beneficiary support is not reaching everyone. We know that we are not reaching into all communities, including Black and minority ethnic communities who may be at greater risk of stroke. We need to address that, and we also need to work with the NHS and other partners to make sure that their services are also truly inclusive. So we would love to hear from you any ideas that you have or activities that you are undertaking to make your groups accessible to everyone in your local communities, regardless of age, background, or ethnicity. Next slide, please. So I referred earlier to the fact that we're in a strong financial position. We have, for the first time, a really healthy surplus. Now, we are going to need that surplus because we are entering difficult economic times. And as you all know, inflation is on the up, and it is possible that people may struggle to support charities who are doing so already. But we do have money to invest to accelerate the delivery of our strategy. And so we have set ourselves 4 areas that we're calling step change areas, where we want to make an even bigger difference to the lives of stroke survivors. So I'm going to talk you through those 4 areas of focus, which is really our priority for the next 3 years. So the first ambitious goal that we've set ourselves is that we want to reach and add value to the lives of every newly diagnosed stroke survivor. Now, we have done our maths, and we know that about 80,000 stroke survivors each year are discharged from hospital. At the moment, the Stroke Association is only reaching 30,000 of those stroke survivors who are in their first 12 months. So we want to be able to fill that gap and to be able to reach out to and provide support to the remaining 50,000 stroke survivors who we're not currently reaching in the first 12 months. So this is a big challenge, but we know that when people are first discharged from hospital, it's at the time when they're feeling most vulnerable, most alone. And that is the period when we can really make a difference, helping people to come to terms with a new norm and helping them access all the available support in the community. And stroke groups and volunteers are going to be vital to helping us achieve this ambitious vision. Next slide, please. The second area where we're going to be focusing on over the next 3 years is thrombectomy. Now, I think most of you will know that thrombectomy is an extraordinary clot retrieval procedure where the clot is physically removed from the brain and it prevents disability for those who otherwise might spend their life in a nursing or residential home. Our vision is for thrombectomy to be available 24/7 across the whole of the UK for all patients who could benefit. In England, the target is for 10% of patients to be eligible for thrombectomy, but right now it's only about 3% who are receiving it, and we know there is a big postcode lottery. If you have a stroke in London, you are much more likely to have a thrombectomy than if you live in the East or the Midlands, for example. So we want to level that playing field and make sure that everyone gets access to thrombectomy. Many of you will be aware that we launched a policy report at the end of July calling for 5 key recommendations. And we have published an open letter to government, and we're really keen to get as many signatures to that open letter as possible. Thank you to all of you who've signed that open letter to date. We've had over 1,000 signatures from stroke groups, so that's just brilliant. We're at about 8,300 signatures, I think. We ideally want to get to 10,000 signatures by the end of this week, because we're handing in our open letter to Downing Street next Monday. So please do spread the word. And if you want to sign the open letter, please just go to the exhibition space find the part of the exhibition space that is information from our talks, and you can sign the letter over the coming days. Next slide, please. Perfect. So our third step change area is about raising the profile of stroke as a cause and the Stroke Association as a charity. We want more people to know about the Stroke Association because we want them to benefit from our fantastic support offerings. We know that not enough people know that we exist, and not enough people know about the fabulous support we can provide. So we want more people to get support, and we know that if more people get support from us, they are more likely to give support in the form of time, voice, or money. So we are prioritising building on our Rebuilding Lives campaign, and we're currently looking to work with a new agency so that we can find fresh ways of making stroke the priority it really needs to be. So next slide, please. So our fourth step change area is around transforming our income growth. So we want to create the vision and plan to motivate many more thousands of donors to give to us and thereby increase our income. We know that many donors love our research offer, and so we want to work on creating a compelling vision and plan to raise more money for stroke research. But we also believe that if we can appropriately communicate and package our vision and plan around reaching every newly diagnosed stroke survivor, we believe that that could also appeal to new and existing donors. We want to explore the opportunities for more government and lottery money, and we're committed to continuing to work with you to make you aware of local funding opportunities for groups and working together so that you can realise that funding to grow your group's activities. So, in summary, we're in a good place as a charity. We're resilient, we've come out of the COVID pandemic stronger, and we've got some exciting ambitions for the future. But we know as a charity that we cannot tackle the challenge of stroke on our own. We can only do it if we work together. And I'm really excited about the important role that volunteers and stroke communities play today, but I see an even bigger role for volunteers and stroke communities, including stroke groups in the future. You are really connected to local stroke survivors. You are trusted through your groups. You provide an enormous amount of fun and friendship. And I feel really optimistic that the Stroke Group Network has the opportunity for all of you to learn and share from each other and to create a really vibrant, empowered, and self-sustaining community that makes a difference to thousands of stroke survivors going forwards in the future. And I really do believe that together we can achieve more. So I hope that was helpful and interesting to some of you. I'm now going to invite to join me for a little chat Stephen King, our Chair of Trustees, and David Jones from Grampian. Welcome both.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Great, it's really nice to see you both. So I'm going to turn to David first. So David, maybe you'd just like to briefly introduce yourself, and then maybe you could tell the audience what's your connection to your stroke group, and why do you think stroke groups are so important?
Well, I'm David Jones. I'm joining you from a very cold and wintry Aberdeen. I'm a stroke survivor and I help run the Grampian Stroke Club, We are probably the most northerly stroke club in the UK. I also sit in a number of committees, and I try to represent the lived experience issues. Juliet's already touched on the important points. The Stroke Association is a very powerful organisation of staff and volunteers. The staff at the engine room, they churn out the vision, the direction, the strategy and resources, but the volunteers tend to be the coalface, and they need to work together. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what other groups. I'm here in Aberdeen. I'm sure the things I do badly, or maybe I don't do at all. I'm very keen to learn from other groups, to find best practice and improve the entire organisation.
Oh, that's fantastic, David. And I love your analogy. And it's so right. You know, the Stroke Association staff, we need to remember our place. We're in the engine room. We're trying to kind of make this train work, but it's you guys, our volunteers, who are the public face of the organisation in many cases and providing that much needed support. So I love that analogy of the engine room and the coalface. So thank you, David. So Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself, maybe explain your connection to stroke groups and, you know, why you think stroke groups matter?
Hi, yeah, I'm Stephen King, and I describe myself as chief volunteer. So I'm chair of the board of the Stroke Association. And I was thinking about David's analogy, and I think I'm probably admiral of the fleet because Juliet is the captain of the ship. But that's possibly stroking my ego rather. But anyway, so what's my connection? So I'm a volunteer. And what's my connection to stroke? Well, my granny was a really important part of me growing up. And sadly, in her later life, she had a stroke and was left with aphasia. We didn't know it was a stroke. She just went home and she just had a funny turn, as they said, went to hospital and came back as a changed woman. And we lived with that and the frustration of that in my sort of, formative years. And so the other aspect of that is that Kate, my wife, is an active volunteer in a local aphasia group. I help out on occasions, and I see the amazing way that just talking with other stroke survivors and with and the sort of restorative and power of that peer support helps people on their recovery journey, and it is constantly amazing. And I visited lots of stroke groups in my time, and it always amazes me the ingenuity and the fun that people have, but actually underneath that serious purpose of helping people on what is a really difficult journey. So, I really value stroke clubs, and so I'm based at the other end of the country from David. I'm in near Stansted Airport in Essex, but I lived happily in Scotland, so I often like to visit Scotland and find out what's going on there.
Great, thank you, Stephen. I'm obviously going to have to salute to you in future, which is slightly daunting. The concept of you as a vice admiral is really rather intimidating.
It is rather, isn't it? Yes, it's probably not a good idea, not a good analogy, but anyway.
But no, thank you. And I'm not sure that everybody necessarily knows that all of our trustees are volunteers. We're blessed to have a board of trustees of 15, and every single one of them is unpaid, is a volunteer who do the job because of their love and passion for stroke. And we are so lucky to have all of that expertise and experience, not only actually at board level, but through all our kind of networks of volunteers. And I should have said I'm based in the Forest of Dean. So I live on the England-Wales border. I'm always confused about whether I'm in England or Wales. And I hate to say it, David, but it's actually gloriously sunny here. Sorry. Good. Okay, so why don't we explore another theme? So, David, I'm interested in what you think is working well at the moment in terms of the stroke group network? It's always easy to focus on the areas for improvement, but I'd be really interested in your reflections on, what are you feeling encouraged about? What are you feeling positive about at the moment?
The service we provide, when we provide it, is magnificent. We provide peer support, which is so important to people, particularly when it is possible. In the middle of, they've got no idea what's happening to them. Their friends and family have got no idea. Their colleagues have got no idea. They need peer support, and that we do magnificently. However, as you pointed out earlier, the other side of the coin, there are hundreds and thousands of people out there that we don't reach, and they're the ones that we should be concentrating on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, David. When it works, it works brilliantly. And we hear from all the research that we do every year with stroke groups that almost the single biggest thing that stroke survivors most appreciate in terms of support for their recovery is support from other stroke survivors. Other stroke survivors who are maybe further down that journey, who can share those kind of tips, who can provide encouragement. I mean, is that the sense that you get within your stroke group, David, and across the network?
Indeed, but not just stroke survivors, also their friends and family and colleagues. In my case, going back to work was a real pain, because not only was I confused, but so were my colleagues. I didn't know how to react to them, they didn't know how to react to me. That was a real issue.
Yeah, no, I think that whole return to work for many stroke survivors can be really challenging. And your point about when you've had a stroke, you often don't know how to navigate the system, do you? And so hearing from other stroke survivors and hearing how they've navigated the system, what support services are out there, what they can do to help themselves is just so important, isn't it? But so much of this is word of mouth.
Correct.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's unreliable word of mouth. I think when you're in hospital, the doctors and nurses are trained. They know what to do, and they know who to talk to, and they're well defined procedures. When you come home, there's nothing. Your friends and family know nothing. There's nobody to turn to. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
And a frightening world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really scary. And I think that's where stroke groups and the Stroke Association can make such a difference by working together. No, that's brilliant, David. And Stephen, what are you feeling sort of encouraged about or optimistic about in terms of the future of stroke groups and volunteers and communities generally?
Well, if you think about our strategy, our strategy is to make stroke a priority and making sure that people get the support that they need. I'm optimistic about both, really. So making stroke a priority, it's that common voice. So we know certainly in England, there's a lot more devolution and there's a lot more emphasis in the NHS on listening to the patient voice. And I think the sort of work with stroke associations and with stroke clubs and us working together so that we're all saying the same thing consistently is immensely powerful in the NHS. And I know David up in Aberdeen, there's an NHS board there, the sort of the voice of his group. Similarly in Wales, there's NHS boards. It's important that that local decision making is we're asking what's going on with thrombectomy in this area. Why have we not got that service? What are the and holding the local NHS to account. So I'm seeing that starting to happen. There's a lot further to go. We've got but the conditions are there. The new arrangements, certainly in England, show that we've got local boards. They're accountable. They hold their meetings online. You can ask questions, and I think local stroke groups can and not make themselves a nuisance, but really make sure and hold feet to the fire of the accountable NHS leaders, because there's huge challenges in the NHS. I work in it in another life. I work in the NHS, and there's lots of priorities, and we've absolutely got to make sure that stroke is there. But we've got the conditions, and then on the sort of link to that, just the way stroke has started to appear. So Juliet talked about Emmerdale. I think that is just fantastic. So it's raising our profile at the national level, and I'm really pleased to see that we've now got plans in all 4 countries of the UK. So again, that's built up. And funnily enough, I turned on and watched Grand Designs because I'm interested in building at the moment, and there was a whole story about a stroke survivor last week, and there, and watching. It was the wife of the couple. She had had a stroke, had left her with aphasia and then in a wheelchair, and watching her journey just through the sort of 2 years of the program, just shows there is life after stroke, there is hope after stroke, and people can get better if they get, and get back on with life. And it was a really good story. So I'm optimistic about that, and then I'm really optimistic about making sure that people get the support they need. That work with stroke clubs, I just see it every day and every time, and that's why I really enjoy these meetings, meeting people and listening to people and all the ingenious things that they're doing to support people, and that power of peer support. As David said, it's a terrifying journey, when you have a stroke, and particularly when you come out of hospital and you're just, we keep hearing it. I feel abandoned, I feel left alone, and the Stroke Club provides you and your family with just that encouragement and support and somewhere to be every week or every fortnight or every month or whatever it is, just to start and just rebuild your confidence to get back on with life. So I'm encouraged about all of that, and I'm encouraged also about the Stroke Association. We've reflected at our board meeting in July that we are in a great place. We've got, as Juliet said, our finances are in a much better place, so we are resilient, and we've got a good strategy, and we've got some great leadership, and we really are putting our foot hard on the pedal to push hard over this next couple of years. And I really do see the signs that we will make some progress.
That's brilliant, Steve, and I agree with absolutely everything you've said. And I think the opportunity for all of us to amplify each other's voices and to have a consistent message to the NHS is really important. And that's where things like our thrombectomy campaign, the engine room, the staff, we can do all the hard work in terms of pulling together the evidence, coming up with the key recommendations. You guys can take all of that and hopefully amplify our voice and get your voice heard by some of the key local system decision makers. Yes, Mom. But yeah, the opportunities are huge. But we really we have to be quite politically savvy at the moment, because there's a lot of competing issues out there for system decision makers' attention. So the more that we can get stroke survivors to tell their stories, the more likely I think it is that system decision makers are really going to hear us, because you talk with lived experience. I don't. I'm fortunate enough not to be living with a stroke, but when a stroke survivor is talking to a really important person, my goodness me, they really do take notice. Great. Okay, so lots of things to be optimistic about. David, where do you think we still need to get better? Where are the areas for improvement?
Something which I hear quite often is admin. I mean, nobody likes admin at all, but obviously the groups need to be administrated, and at a minimum, the finance needs to be managed. And people don't like managing money, and they run a mile. I don't know what the answer is. There's obviously some scope to maybe streamline or reduce the nature of the admin we have to do. Maybe by, rather than saying do this, you should say this is what we want. We don't mind how you do it, but it needs. This is what we need to deliver. I don't know, but I do hear admin over and over again as an issue in other groups.
Yeah, and David, we've heard that consistently from stroke groups over the years, and we hear it from our staff too when we do our staff engagement surveys. people consistently say the processes are too complicated. Yeah, let's focus on what's really important, because we do have to have some mandatory training in place, because stroke groups are providing support to people who are often very vulnerable. But I think your challenge to us about how can we streamline it, how can we simplify it, how can we make it as easy as possible for you, so that actually the vast majority of your time spent is on peer support, not on admin, is a message well heard. And I think we've done a good job with the training system. We used to have this nightmare training system. I can't even remember what it was called. It was so awful. And we've now got something called Learn, which is a lot simpler. So I think that's the first of a number of process improvements that we want to introduce over the next 12 to 18 months. And it'd be really good to hear from people. Do pop into the chat box the things that particularly frustrate and irritate you. Be specific, because admin is quite broad. If you tell us specifically what gets in the way and what takes up too much time, that would be really helpful to us, because then we can hopefully address it. David, is there anything else you want to say on that?
No, I'll leave it to the chat boxes. I'm sure there are hundreds of questions out there.
I suspect that your point might trigger quite a lot of comments from people. So, Stephen, where do you think we still need to improve?
Well, I think it's just going back to that common voice and having sort of key messages and keep amplifying them, because I think we have made some great steps, but they're baby steps at the moment. And I think we working together, being absolutely clear what the message is to the local NHS, and we've clearly got to tailor that message to particularly to the 4 countries, but also even within regions, but making sure that we're all saying the same thing, because there's nothing more powerful. I know, because I've sat on NHS boards, that if people are consistently asking the same question, you absolutely have to get going on it. And I do know that for example, I made myself a real nuisance on our local stroke board, because I always asked for the stroke performance figures, and so they always gave them to me, and then there was always a recovery plan and what they were going to do about it, getting performance. So I think we just need to get better at that, and in particular, if we can find stroke survivors who can articulate and participate in those meetings, it will be a real the benefit to us, because this isn't a competitive market, but it is competition. We're competing against cancer and heart disease and other things, who are very good at this type of thing. So I'd love us to get better at that. I also just reflect on David's point on admin. I think we have got better at admin, and but there's always more to do to make it more straightforward. But I say take some comfort, David. We have an audit committee that looks at problems in stroke clubs, and the number of issues that have since I've been attending those meetings for about 4 years now, and the number of issues is less, about 10% of what they were 4 or 5 years ago. So we are working hard, and it's still on our sites, I believe, to improve.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a real priority for us. That's brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, David and Stephen. I suspect, or rather hope, that this chat has prompted some questions in the chat box. So maybe I could invite Beth back onto the stage. And then, Beth, do you want to let us know what's going on in the chat box?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much, the 3 of you, for having a fantastic start to the event. It's brilliant. And just a quick reminder to people to check out the exhibition space that Juliet mentioned, because that has supporting information from the talks, so you can go and digest in your own time around the Saving Brains campaign, and the lovely video of David, who talks about being on Stroke Group Voices and what that means and what that's about, because we are looking for more people to come and join David and others. So do watch that as well. And yeah, keep posting your questions for the speakers. And I am actually going to ask Anne to come back to look at the reflections, because you've been on that main chat box, haven't you, Anne? And what are people saying? What's the feeling and the reflections so far before we go into question and answers?
Yeah, there's lots of connections going on in there and people introducing themselves. And Mary from Northern Ireland said it's really great to be chatting to people from England, Scotland and Wales. So a big hello to everyone. Lots of positive comments to see that the Stroke Association is in a better financial position. That's nice for people to hear. And some comments on the back of what David said about the support when you leave in hospital. Patrick from Hunstanton said he didn't have his family living near him and he had to do it all on his own. And Clive was similar and said living alone is a real challenge. That has been my experience, and I don't. I've had to do much of my journey from normal to stroke survivor on my own, and I did it with very little help, but I've actually amazed that I have come through it bigger and better and stronger. And Leslie from the Phoenix Stroke Group in Horsham has said they've just had a big extension and refurbishment to their clubhouse, and they're open to taking more new members and supporting stroke survivors if they can. And just off the back of the comment about sharing your frustrations and things, there have been a couple of comments about the finances things that David mentioned. One, Joni mentioned that, you know, it's difficult with just typically one transaction a month and how to access and send the monthly accounts. There should be more flexibility around that. But there's also come some positive comments. So Laurie from Nelsey Stroke Survivors Group have said that she can see some great improvements with what the Stroke Association have been done over the last year, particularly the Stroke Group Network team. They've been really making a difference, and there's updates of many key documents and processes and much more regular contact. So some positives as well as the frustrations. There are improvements.
Good. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Lovely to hear all that. Thank you for sharing that, Anne, and for everybody being so engaged today. It makes a difference to the conference. Okay, we will go into a few question and answers because there has been quite a few coming through, which is great, and we'll do it for about 10 minutes before we close off the session. So there's been quite a few questions, I think, in relation to the newly diagnosed step change, Juliet, that you mentioned. So there's quite a few coming through on that. So one of them, John in Wales, was wondering, how are those stroke survivor figures calculated? Are they reflecting all areas of the UK or just England and Wales? So when you talked about reaching newly diagnosed stroke survivors.
So great question. That is a UK figure. So what we have done is we have taken the number of new strokes from SNAP, which is the stroke audit for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and also looked at the data from the Scottish stroke care audit and calculated the number of people who've had a first stroke, who are still alive and who end up being discharged. So that's the 80,000 figure that we want to reach, and that is a UK figure.
Thank you. And then there was another question from the watch party in the Midlands. So it's
quite
great.
Active.
They have been active. It's brilliant. Lots of questions there. And I think one of their questions was in relation to newly diagnosed stroke survivors. Will there be any referral arrangements? So how, and I know the work is still in really early days, but that link between referring into a stroke support group in that area and where you might see that work going in the newly diagnosed step change area.
So I know that is a big bugbear for a lot of stroke groups, that either your referrals are inconsistent from hospital and community-based stroke teams, or in fact they're non-existent. So I think there's a real job to do to make sure that it is clear in the stroke pathway when and how those referrals to stroke groups happen. Now, one of the things that we are acutely aware of in terms of reaching every newly diagnosed stroke survivor is we know where people are. They're in hospital. Before they get discharged, they're pretty much all in a hospital bed. And so one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that we're actively there for everyone before they're discharged from hospital. So we want to make clear what our in-hospital support offer is. And I know that in some localities, we do have stroke survivors who are absolutely fantastic at doing ward visits, going around, preparing people for that new journey and saying, I'm part of a stroke group, I'm here, we'll be in contact. I think there's opportunities for that to be extended. But I think we also need to make sure that the policy documents that I referred to earlier go further in addressing the challenge that we have with referrals, because we know that most people really want peer support. They may not always want it face to face, but actually stroke groups now are being very flexible in terms of how you're providing that support. It's by phone, it's WhatsApp, it's online, it's face to face. So I think we need to promote that and get hospital teams in particular to understand the value of that peer support offer. So that's all being looked at within this newly diagnosed stroke survivor work stream. There's actually 9 work packages. Only one of them is the in-hospital support offer. There are others as well, but addressing the referrals is a key thing. And the other actually is about making sure that there is a stroke key worker all across the UK, because our stroke support coordinators are effectively stroke key workers. And one of the reasons why some stroke survivors and not others get access to Stroke Association ongoing support is because in some areas it's commissioned by the NHS, in other areas it's not. And the policy documents all state that there should be a stroke key worker everywhere in all localities. So that's a very big influencing priority for us, because again, that will help to drive referrals to stroke groups if everyone is accessing that life after stroke support through a key worker.
Fantastic. That sounds really, really positive. Music to everyone's ears, I'm sure. Is there anything you'd like to reflect on that, David or Stephen, from that perspective of referrals into groups? From your perspective, David, how it works with you?
Well, it doesn't work is the answer to that. When it does work, it tends to be by word of mouth. So typically, some people talk to a stroke nurse or a physiotherapist or whatever, and some know about us and some don't know about us. So it's a very patchy story, which is maybe our own fault. Maybe we need to be selling ourselves more.
And I just reflect, I was just thinking about it because our group is a more specialist group to support people with their recovery from aphasia, and there's blockage, and often the referrals should come from the speech and language therapy teams, but of course there is huge problems with those and long waits, and it takes ages before people get connected to us, but actually interestingly quite a lot of people then turn up through other local stroke clubs, so they get referred into the local stroke club and then they know about us. So there is that sort of internal marketing between us, so people find the specialist support that they need. I'm always struck by, I've met engineers, I've met mathematicians, I've met people who've got languages, they are looking for other stroke survivors to help them through their journey and recover what they need. And I think the power of the internet and some virtual groups and other things are important. So we shouldn't ignore what I call the secondary referral. We need to know what those resources are amongst ourselves in our fantastic network right across the country, and be able to see if we can connect people horizontally as well as that sort of vertical from hospital.
Thank you, Stephen. Really good point. And I think, if people want to see all the groups that are accepting new people, we have a new function on the website which has a map, and it shows all the groups that are available to people. So we can talk more about that in our session 5. We'll go into more detail. But yeah, and just linking to that work again, Midlands Watch Party have asked about a hospital pack that could be given as part of leaving hospital as a newly diagnosed stroke survivor that has links to National Stroke Services. Do you see that work as well sitting in the newly diagnosed stream around what people actually receive?
Definitely. And I think that's part of the sort of hospital support offer, because we know that people who are supported by the Stroke Association do get a kind of a welcome pack when they're in hospital, but those who live in localities where there isn't a Stroke Association service currently don't, and that's not right. So we do want to make sure that there is good tailored information for all stroke survivors when they're in hospital before they're discharged from before they're discharged home. And one of the things that we've been testing over the last 12 months is something called the personal stroke record, because one of the things that stroke survivors have consistently told us is that often they're discharged from hospital, they don't even know what type of stroke they've had. No one's talked them through what medications they're on and why. No one has explained to them what the next stage of the stroke pathway is. No one has told them what services are out there in the community, who their key worker is, what to do if they want to get back into the system. Yeah, this information just isn't often available. It is in some parts of the country, but not everywhere. So again, I think that personal stroke record, where everyone can have a document that explains, what's happened to them as an individual and what's out there in the community, can again help people in those early days.
Fantastic. Sounds really positive. I'll just come to one quick question, Stephen, or I don't know if others know, because there was a reflection around, are there any recent statistics about the number of people with aphasia and stroke in the UK? Do we know that off the top of our heads? We can find out.
I don't think we do know, but
So the
it
data
is a
hasn't
great
changed.
Question. Yeah.
So the data hasn't changed. I mean, the data that we use says that the numbers are enormous. 400,000 stroke survivors each year diagnosed with aphasia or serious speech and communication difficulties. That's the number that we report, and that number sadly is not declining. So we effectively talk about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 stroke survivors with serious speech and communication difficulties who need that really tailored and intensive speech and language support. But of course, groups provide all sorts of opportunities for people to practice and to develop their confidence in speaking and communicating, getting used to numbers, that sort of thing. So that's where, again, groups can make a really big difference in sort of supplementing the more specialist speech and language therapy that comes from speech and language practitioners.
Absolutely. And we know there's a huge amount of groups across the network who offer communication support. And again, in session 5, tomorrow, the end session, we're going to talk about what the network looks like and all of the types of activity that groups do, because we've got some really great stats on some of that stuff. So fantastic. Have we got time for one more quick question? There was a question around coordinators again. What proportion of Stroke Association support coordinators are funded by the NHS rather than the charity? Do we have reflections on that, even if we don't know exact figures?
I would say, and I'm sure one of our locality impact associate directors will correct me if I get this horribly wrong, about 98% of our stroke coordinators will be funded by the state, either the NHS or local authorities. The vast majority of our contracts are with the NHS, but we do have some with local authorities. As part of those contracts, we do require the NHS or the local authority to make a contribution to our overhead costs. We struggle, to be honest, to recover the full costs from all of our services. And we are doing some work at the moment to understand the gap and to work out how we can get, as I said earlier, a stroke key worker for everyone everywhere. But basically, the kind of direct costs of those services are funded by the state. The indirect costs are only partially covered, aren't they, Stephen?
Yes, I was going to say that. I think we fund all the stroke, to a greater or lesser extent, and we get from some NHS regions we get a good contribution and others less. So that's all. And they bring that huge sort of value, because as Juliet said, we ask for a modest contribution to our overheads, but there's an awful lot of other stuff, all our research, all our information, all our training, all our, all of these things that we fund. That value flows through our stroke coordinators, so the NHS get a bargain.
And we need to be better at telling that story.
And we need to be
That's
better
one of the
at
things.
telling
We're
that
very
story.
modest.
Exactly.
Some of you will know that my job before this one at the Stroke Association was working for Macmillan Cancer Support. My goodness me, the cancer charities are good at shouting loud and proud about their achievements and their impact. We need to be a little bit less modest in stroke, and I think we've got a great story to tell, but we don't always communicate it with enough confidence and authority.
And all that accumulated wisdom in the stroke groups that inform everything we say. We're bringing all of that to and to help people, help NHS region consult. So we bring a huge amount of value. So we would like more NHS regions and boards to fund our coordination, and that means we can do more.
And David, you were nodding when I said we need to be a bit more confident and a bit less modest. What were you thinking?
Blow our own trumpets. We are magnificent. Tell the world we're magnificent.
Okay, boss.
Absolutely. Well, on that magnificent comment, I think we need to wrap it up. There's a few more questions that we haven't managed to get to, but we will absolutely pick them up. I think we could share Juliet, Stephen and David's thoughts on some of these questions we haven't got to, and we'll definitely share it with you in the exhibition space over the next 30 days. So I just want to say a huge thank you, Juliet, David, Stephen, for a fantastic start to the conference. It's made me smile. I'm really excited about the next few days. And please do take a break, everybody, from your screen. Grab a cuppa, have your lunch in a bit, join the Connect and Chat room at any point before 1. And then we will see you back here at 1 o'clock with Jen and her guest speakers for the next session, which is focusing on the stroke care pathway, which chimes really nicely to some of the conversations we've had this morning. So thank you all, and we'll see you later this afternoon.